Talking guys, today in Resuming Films, I'm going to explain about a sci-fi action thriller called Jumper, where a teenager discovers he can teleport anywhere and anytime. But not everything is flowers. Soon he is chased by a mysterious organization that hunts people who have this power. Be aware that from now on, there will be spoilers. David Rice is a teenager who lives a normal life in a small rural town. He talks to Millie, who is a classmate he has a crush on. David then presents Millie with a snow globe, which she in turn accepts and apparently enjoys the gift very much. Another classmate, Mark, arrives at the scene and snatches the gift from Millie's hand, taunting David. Soon after, Mark throws the snow globe in the middle of a frozen lake that was there in front of the school. Completely frustrated, David tries to retrieve the globe by going to the lake. Millie asks him not to do this because it's dangerous. David ignores her and continues. David then makes it to the globe, but the ice gives way, and he falls into the middle of the frozen lake. Desperate, Millie runs to try to help him. David is trapped under the water because the current drags him away, causing him to no longer find the hole where he fell. Suddenly, he is teleported into a hallway in a city's public library. David at this point has no idea what just happened, and completely in shock and confusion, he walks out of the library, trying not to draw too much attention. Something kind of impossible, as there's a completely soaked guy walking in the middle of the library with a not-so-normal face. He then goes home, and his father, William, realizes he is late. David lives alone with his father, as his mother left him when he was still a child. William asks where David was, but he doesn't answer. William gets angry and follows David to his room. David then locks the room, but William tries to force the door open. As soon as William manages to open the door, David disappears and reappears in the library again. David realizes that he now has a new skill and can use it to improve his life. He uses his incredible ability to return home and takes some money he's been saving, hidden on his bedroom wall. Then he moves to a bigger city and starts over from scratch. From now on, David's goal is to try to learn more about his skills by practicing in a park, to see if he can better control these powers. He looks in a tourist book and sees different places of tourist attractions around the world, trying to teleport to one of these places. He sees the famous Empire State Building and remembers being there with his mother, Mary. Things in his room suddenly start to fly and fall, so he lands on top of the Empire State. David soon notices a pattern in his travels, where he can only teleport to places he's been before. Out of money, David decides to use his powers to try to rob a bank. He goes to the nearest one and asks to use the bathroom. And as he walks, he takes a look inside the bank vault. That night, David manages to teleport to the vault and grabs as much money as he can. He makes several trips in a row, filling his bag as much as he can every time. The next day, a special team is assigned to investigate last night's bank robbery. Roland Cox then appears and tells the bank manager that he works for the government and requests all video footage and the names of everyone who joined the bank in the last month. Roland notes that the bank vault has not been opened and authorities have no idea how the robbery happened. Roland then seems to know types of people who would have abilities who might have done something like this. Several years have passed, and now David lives in the center of New York, in a penthouse apartment. This apartment that is equipped with various resources, such as money from various countries, passports, weapons, vehicles, and most importantly, lots and lots of photos, pasted by across the wall of the apartment, from different locations around the world. He has everything you want and need. David then teleports to the top of Big Ben in London just to take a look at the view from above, then goes to a bar where he meets a beautiful woman. David then carelessly teleports closer to her, and someone else, Griffin, ends up seeing him abusing his ability. David spends a night with the girl. The next day, he leaves for Fiji, an archipelago with more than 300 islands, famous for idyllic beaches, to surf giant waves. He then heads to Egypt, where he stops for a snack at the top of the Sphinx. In a tropical jungle, a man teleports, trying to escape. He uses his power several times through the forest but ends up being held by a kind of rope that has electricity. Roland then appears. A teleporter, Jumper, asks why Roland did this to him, and Roland responds by saying that people who possess this power are abominations and should be exterminated. He then slashes the man with a knife, killing him. Roland then gets a call about the robbery that happened several years ago, the one that David had made. David arrives back at his apartment in NY and finds Roland is there in the middle of his living room waiting for you. Roland tells David he's investigating a bank robbery, but he's not police. David asks Roland to leave, but Roland picks up a bat and electrocutes David. He then tries to teleport to escape, but can only reach a few meters. Roland then shoots a power cord, trapping David. Roland anchors his staff to the ground and anchors David, preventing him from using his power to go too far. David, in turn, desperately tries to escape and manages to reach the secret room of his house where he keeps money and passports. David then grabs several bags of money and disappears. He appears at his father's house, in his old bedroom. William hears David and runs upstairs to David's room, where he begs him to stay, saying he's not sure if he's losing his mind because of his son's disappearance. David then tells William that he's not going crazy, but he quickly disappears. The next day, David looks for Millie and finds her working at a local bar. He then meets the former school bully, Mark, and they soon start a fight. David then ends up teleporting Mark to a bank vault, dropping him there. David returns to Millie and says he now works as a banker. In the next scene, he asks how his old town is. Millie says she still dreams of traveling the world. David offers her a trip to Rome with, quote. Millie is ecstatic to hear this and says she would love to go out with him. Behind them is Griffin, watching them both. A few hours later, David and Millie are in Rome, on their way to see the Colosseum. Meanwhile, Roland pretends to work for the CIA to get to Mark, who is on trial at a police station. Roland asks Mark about what happened at the bank, and then manages to find out about Millie and that she had gone to Rome with David. In Rome, the two lovebirds are in an apartment, talking about their lives and everything that has happened in the last 2 years. David and Millie are in a romantic mood, share an intimate moment, and spend some time in the hotel suite. Later that day, David takes Millie to see the Colosseum, but in a different way, making use of her abilities. They explore the surroundings, avoiding the guards so they don't get caught. David then separates from Millie to open a door that was locked and finally finds Griffin. David said. Griffin says he can also teleport, referring to himself as a jumper, or jumpers, in plain English. Griffin then charges David for his lavish, carefree, and uncautious lifestyle, and says that a group of people called Paladins are determined to kill all jumpers. So when he finishes his explanation, some Paladins appear. They approach and grab their sticks, and a fight breaks out. David tries to run, but is trapped by one of the electrified cables. Their ability to teleport doesn't work when they're being electrocuted. Griffin then fights the Paladins alone, quickly defeating them. Griffin then helps David and explains that he's been killing Paladins that have been following them for years. He then teleports to his secret lair. David sees a residue of this teleport called Jump Scar and follows Griffin. The two have a brief conversation, and David returns in search of Millie, who had been waiting for him in the Colosseum. David then takes Millie away, leaving the Colosseum under the fangs. Millie demands an explanation of what is going on. However, before David starts trying to explain, the police arrive and arrest David for breaking into the Colosseum. At the police station, David is interrogated, but claims that he is only a tourist who violated the rules of the tourist attraction and apologizes. The officers then let David go, saying to wait for the U.S. Embassy contact. While David waits, a woman enters, and David recognizes her. It's Maria, his mother. Mary tells David he has only 30 seconds before more Paladins arrive, and hands him the key to his handcuffs. Mary runs away, and David goes after her but loses her. David then meets Millie, and the two head to the airport. There, David tells Millie that they need to split up. Millie is angry to hear this but proceeds with her flight alone. Meanwhile, Roland arrives at William's house and introduces himself as part of the IRS. Roland asks about David, but William is hostile and uncooperative. William tells Roland that he hasn't known about David for 8 years. He also mentions how Mary abandoned him when David turned 5 years old. William then asks Rolando to leave, but Roland refuses. David arrives at Griffin's hideout and sees Griffin's walls filled with photos and information about Paladins around the world. David asks Griffin for an explanation of why the Paladins are killing the jumpers, and Griffin explains that warfare has been going on since the Dark Ages. According to Griffin, Paladins are religious fanatics who believe that the power to teleport should only lie in God. He then tells David that the Paladins didn't hesitate to kill anyone just to get to David. Then David's plug drops and he realizes that his father and Millie may be in danger. David quickly teleports to his father's house and finds him unconscious on the floor. He teleports them to a hospital, and the medical team rushes to William's aid. David returns to Griffin's hideout wanting more information about Roland, as he intends to kill him. Griffin says it's useless, as he's been trying to track down Roland for over 10 years, and with each encounter, Griffin only comes away with more scars. David offers to help catch Roland, but Griffin refuses. Griffin then teleports to China, but David follows, still trying to convince Griffin to stop helping. Griffin finally agrees when David tells him he knows where Roland might be quoting Millie. They decide to split up. David would pick up Millie, while Griffin goes back into hiding to arm himself. David arrives at Millie's apartment. She is then surprised to see him again. Millie is still mad at David for the last date. David hears Roland and a few more men arriving. Without an alternative, David must tell the truth to Millie, revealing himself to be a jumper. Millie is confused as she witnesses David's powers go mad trying to escape. Knowing that danger is coming, David grabs Millie and teleports the two to Griffin's hideout. Roland and the other Paladins enter Millie's apartment and find it empty. But Roland finds a scar, sort of a trail left by jumpers when teleporting, as mentioned earlier. They take a contraption out of a box, place it under the heel scar, and a portal begins to form. They are trying to reopen the heel scar so they can follow David. David meets Griffin, but Griffin is angry to find Millie there with them. Griffin tells David about the machine the Paladins have, and says bringing Millie into hiding was a big mistake and would lead the Paladins straight to them. David and Griffin check the scar on the heel and see that it's getting bigger. Seconds later, Roland appears. David and Griffin go into hiding. But as David goes into hiding, he sees a photo of Mary, his mother, on the wall among known Griffin Paladins. David is then hit with an electrical cord and pinned to a wall. Griffin comes in with a flamethrower in hand and starts a fight with Roland. Griffin uses his abilities to gain an advantage over Roland. Roland resists the fight well, using the technology of the Paladins. Griffin manages to land a powerful blow on Roland, taking him out of hiding, and teleports away, then returns with a bus hurling him towards Roland. Roland acts fast and manages to dodge the bus. Millie finds David tied to the electrical wires and tries to rescue him. Roland then finds Millie and appears to be determined to kill her. She is paralyzed and shocked, but Griffin appears with his flamethrower and throws the villain back into the gaping crevice, and Griffin jumps in with him, continuing the fight. Now back to Millie's apartment. Meanwhile, still in hiding, Millie manages to free David, who is tied up the whole fight. The two then have a brief conversation, and she explains that she doesn't want to get involved in this whole mess and just wants to get back to her normal life. David regrets and agrees with her choice. At the end of their brief conversation, Griffin returns to his hiding place carrying the Paladin's trinket. Suddenly, a cable emerges from the scar, grabbing and pulling Millie through the portal. David is now willing to do anything to rescue his girl. Griffin prepares a bomb as he plans to wipe out all the Paladins together in the apartment. David doesn't accept Griffin's plan. The two start a crazy fight, teleporting to various places in the world, like Egypt, San Francisco, New York, while fighting for the bomb's remote detonator. They end up in a war-torn country, and Griffin finally gets the detonator. But he is careless and doesn't see parts of an energy tower falling on him. David traps Griffin in the electrical tower that is still active. Griffin tries to discourage David from returning to the apartment without the bomb, saying he won't stand a chance against 5 Paladins, but David just ignores him by walking back to the apartment and finding Millie, but is immediately hit by 5 electrical cables from the Paladins' guns and arrests David. He fights, still concentrating on teleporting while being completely anchored to the floor and walls. This makes every apartment start to shake and fall apart, with the wires connected to David and the apartment. Every time he tries to teleport, the apartment doesn't let him because it's a very large structure. He uses all his strength, and finally, with one last attempt, he teleports the entire apartment back to the lake, where he discovered his abilities at the beginning of the film. Most Paladins drown. David uses his last energy to teleport to the library. He regains consciousness and sees that Roland is still alive. David then picks up Roland and leaves him somewhere in the middle of the Grand Canyon. Time passes, and David locates where his mother lives. Mary's daughter answers the door, and David and his mother finally talk. She explains that she is also a Paladin. When David first teleported at the age of 5, Mary made the difficult decision to leave him to protect him from the other Paladins. Now that he is aware of what happened and asks what would happen next, Mary then replies that she would give him an advantage in the race. David then returns to Millie, who has been waiting for him outside the house. The two hold hands, smile at each other, and teleport somewhere. If you were born with this incredible power, how would you use it? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel by activating the bell to receive notification of upcoming videos here on Summarizing Movies. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.